I've heard it 1,000 times. You see a sleek wine cooler on a deal site, think great price, I'll just grab the cheap one, and then a month later you're staring at a humming box that sounds like a dishwasher and a temperature that swings wildly, turning your prized bottles into warm disappointment. That's the exact regret I'm trying to avoid for you today. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. So, does the GarveeHome 24-inch dual-zone wine and beverage refrigerator feel like a smarter buy? Or is it just another pretty box that will leave you wishing you'd splurged a little more? Let's start with the hesitation most of us feel when we sit down to compare a budget cooler with the big brand names. The first question is always, will it keep my wine at the right temperature without constant adjustment? The second is, can it handle the extra cans and bottles I keep for parties without turning my kitchen into a sauna? The GarveeHome promises both with its dual-zone layout, a dedicated wine chamber at 4555F and a separate cooler at 3550F for beers, sodas, or even a few extra bottles that need a slightly colder environment. On paper, that sounds like a win-win, but the real test is how those zones perform when you're pulling a bottle every night or opening the door for a quick cold soda during a game. I installed the unit in my home bar, which is a narrow hallway between the kitchen and the living room. The built-in or freestanding claim is actually quite literal. The unit sits on a sturdy 2-inch steel frame, yet the back is flush enough to slide into a cabinet niche if you ever want to hide it. The digital touch control panel is positioned at eye level, and the first time I tapped the temperature, the display lit up instantly. It's not a glossy touchscreen that lags. The buttons have a tactile click that feels responsive even if your fingers are damp from a glass of wine. You can set each zone independently, and the system remembers your last setting, which saves you the hassle of reprogramming after a power swing. What makes the dual zone truly practical is the way I use the wine side for my red and white collection, while the lower compartment holds my craft beer and mixed drinks. I have a habit of grabbing a cold beer after dinner, and I've found that opening the wine door doesn't cause the cooling temperature to dip dramatically. The R600's super compressor runs quietly, more like a faint hum you barely notice, not the shuddering whine you hear from older units. In a small apartment, that quiet operation matters because I often keep the cooler on while the TV is on. The last thing I want is a constant background noise competing with the dialogue. Now, let's talk capacity because that's where a lot of people get tripped up. The spec sheet says 33 bottles and 100 cans, but the reality depends on what you're actually storing. Standard 750 milliliters bottles fit snugly on the adjustable shelves, but if you have larger magnum bottles or oddly shaped decanters, you'll have to sacrifice a few slots. The can rack is a single tier that can hold tall cans, but the height is limited to about 2.5 inches, so oversized cans won't fit. For most weekend cooks who keep a few bottles of wine, a case of craft beer, and the occasional soda, it's more than enough. If you're a serious collector with dozens of heavy bottles or plan to add a large variety of craft sodas, you might feel cramped after a while. A hidden trade-off appears when you consider the energy usage. Dual-zone models often draw a bit more power because each compartment has its own thermostat and fan. The GarveeHome is rated as energy efficient for its size, but you'll still notice a slight uptick on your monthly electric bill compared to a single-zone unit. That's not a deal-breaker if you value the convenience of having both wine and cold drinks at arm's length, but it's something to weigh if you're trying to keep your utility costs low. Who should buy this cooler? If you're a casual wine enthusiast who enjoys hosting small gatherings and wants a single appliance that can handle both wine and beer without needing a separate fridge, this is a solid middle ground. The dual-zone design means you don't have to buy a separate beverage cooler, which saves floor space and simplifies wiring, especially useful in tight apartments or condo kitchens where every inch counts. It also appeals to people who appreciate a modern aesthetic. The stainless steel finish looks sleek against a wall of cabinets, and the transparent glass door lets you showcase your collection without opening it constantly. On the flip side, skip this model if you're a serious sommelier or a collector who needs precise temperature control down to the degree, or if you own a large inventory of wines that demand consistent humidity. The internal humidity control isn't something the GarveeHome advertises, so you could risk cork drying out over long periods.